Mom, this is just junk metal, my son Ben said, tossing a 1794 flowing hair silver dollar into a cardboard box like it was a bottle cap. He didn't even look at it, didn't notice the way the light caught the worn edges of something priceless. Actually, I think we should just let the scrap guys take it all for $50, his wife Megan added, wrinkling her nose at the dust in the attic. She stood in the doorway like she was afraid the old house might stain her designer clothes. $50? Ben laughed, checking his Rolex, the one he'd bought to celebrate some deal I never understood. Deal. Let's just get this trash out of here so we can list the house. He didn't know he had just thrown away a coin worth over $10 million. He didn't know that the trash in those dusty boxes was worth more than his entire life's earnings combined. And standing there in my late husband's cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of peppermint and old paper, I decided not to say a single word. Before we continue with this story of betrayal and karma, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. And I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have they ever looked right through you like you were invisible? I'd love to read your thoughts, so please share them below. My name is Carol Donovan, and I was 73 years old when my world fell apart. My husband David was a librarian in our small Connecticut town for 40 years. To the outside world, he was a quiet man who wore cardigans with patches on the elbows and always smelled of old paper and peppermint candies. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom colonial house that needed a fresh coat of paint every spring. We drove a 10-year-old Ford that David maintained himself in our garage on Sunday afternoons. We clipped coupons together on Sunday mornings, circling the best deals while drinking coffee from chipped mugs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and it was built on 47 years of love. My son Ben hated it. He hated our small life, as he called it, from the time he was old enough to notice that other kids had bigger houses. I remember when he was 7 years old, he came running into the kitchen with a fistful of dandelions he'd picked from the backyard. His little hands were stained yellow from the stems, and his face was glowing with pride. "Happy birthday, Mommy!" he shouted, holding them up to me like they were roses from a fancy florist. I picked them myself because I don't have any money to buy you a real present. His voice got small at the end, embarrassed that he couldn't give me something from a store. I put those dandelions in a juice glass on the kitchen windowsill, and I changed the water every single day for a week. David took a photograph of them, and I still have it in my wallet to this day. That little boy with the dandelions. Where did he go? As soon as Ben turned 18, he left for the city and never looked back. He became an IT consultant, or at least that's what his LinkedIn profile said, though I never quite understood what he actually did. He married Megan 3 years later, a woman who looked at everything and everyone with a price tag in her eyes. They visited us on holidays sometimes, and even then they spent the whole time on their phones. "You guys live like peasants," Ben would joke, though his eyes weren't smiling when he said it. "Dad, with your brain, you could have been a CEO. Instead, you stamp books for a living." David would just smile, that mysterious, gentle smile of his that I loved so much. "I have everything I need right here, Ben," he would say, squeezing my hand under the table. But Ben never listened, never understood. He only saw what was on the surface, never what was underneath. When David passed away from a sudden heart attack on a Tuesday morning in March, my world collapsed. One moment he was reading the newspaper at breakfast, and the next he was gone. I was 73, alone in the house we had shared for half a century, and the silence was deafening. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like his footsteps, and every time the wind moved the curtains, I looked up, expecting to see him. But I didn't have time to grieve, not properly, because the day after the funeral, while I was still wearing black, Ben and Megan arrived. They didn't bring casseroles or comfort or even a hug that lasted more than 2 seconds. They brought a dumpster, Mom, we need to talk about your living situation, Ben announced, pacing around my living room like it was already his. He was wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than David's monthly pension. This house is too big for you. The stairs are dangerous. The maintenance is a nightmare. I'm fine, Ben, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay strong. I want to stay here. This is where your father is. That's just emotion talking, McGann chimed in, scrolling through something on her tablet without even looking at me. Realistically, Carol, you can't afford this place on your own. The property taxes alone are eating your pension alive. She called me Carol, not Mom. Never Mom, even after 10 years of marriage to my son. They were like a tag team of corporate raiders, and I was the company they planned to strip for parts. Carol, honey, I know this is hard, Megan said, her voice suddenly soft and sweet. But Ben is just looking out for you. He loses sleep worrying about you all alone in this big house. We both do, she added, placing a hand on her chest like she actually meant it. What if you fall? What if there's a fire? We'd never forgive ourselves. The word sounded caring, but here eyes were already calculating the square footage. We've already made some calls, Ben said, putting a heavy hand on my shoulder that felt more like a restraint than comfort. We're going to declutter, sell the house, and get you into a nice assisted living facility. It's called Golden Horizon, Megan added, finally looking up with a practiced smile. It's top tier, Mom, very exclusive. You'll love it there. Now she called me Mom, but only when she wanted something. I felt small standing there in my own living room, smaller than I'd felt in years. Maybe they were right, I thought. Maybe I was just a confused old woman holding on to the past like a life raft. I remembered signing that power of attorney last year when Ben had explained it was for medical emergencies. He had used words I didn't understand, legal terms that made my head spin. It's just in case something happens and we need to make decisions quickly, he had said. You don't want to end up stuck in a hospital with no one authorized to help you, do you? David had been skeptical, but I had signed it anyway because Ben was my son and I trusted him. Because I always trusted him, even when I shouldn't have. Okay, I whispered, hating how weak my voice sounded. Just please, don't throw away your father's things in the attic. He loved his collection. Ben rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. The coin collection? Mom, please. Dad spent his weekends buying pennies at flea markets like some kind of hoarder. It's just heavy junk taking up space, Megan agreed. We'll deal with it. The next morning, the cleaning began. I sat in the kitchen, clutching a cup of cold coffee, listening to the thumping of boots upstairs. It sounded like they were tearing the heart out of the house, ripping away pieces of David with every box they threw. Look at this mess, Ben shouted from the attic, his voice echoing down through the old floorboards. Boxes and boxes of heavy metal. Who keeps this much stuff? I walked up the stairs slowly, my legs feeling like lead, my heart pounding with every step. The attic was filled with dusty, sunlight streaming through the small window, and I could see dust motes dancing in the air. David's wooden cabinets, the ones he had built by hand over 3 weekends one summer, were being emptied carelessly onto the floor. Coins of silver, copper, and gold were being dumped into plastic bins like they were spare change from a piggy bank. My heart lurched into my throat. Ben, stop! I cried out, reaching for his arm. Those aren't just coins. That's a 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle. That's a— Mom, stop, Ben interrupted, holding up a dirty, tarnished disc between his thumb and forefinger. It's covered in grime. It looks like something you'd find in a parking lot. He turned to a man standing nervously in the corner of the attic. It was a guy from a We Buy Junk service that Ben had found on Google that morning. The man, Mr. Varghese, looked nervous, almost sick. He was sweating despite the cool attic air, and his eyes kept darting from the coins to Ben and then Tome. He picked up a coin, a Liberty head nickel that David had searched for years to find, and his hands shook slightly. I saw him swallow hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. Something was wrong with this picture, but Ben was too busy checking his phone to notice. "So, how much for the lot?" Ben asked impatiently, checking his watch. "I just want the space cleared out today." Mr. Varghese licked his lips, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Well, it's a lot of weight. Mixed metals, different conditions," he stammered. "I can give you $2,000 for everything." "2,000?" Megan scoffed from the doorway. "For all this? That barely covers our gas to get here." "Okay, 3,000, Mr. Varghese said quickly, pulling cash from his pocket. "Cash, right now, and I haul it all away, today." Ben clapped his hands together like he'd just closed a major business deal. "Sold. Get it out of here." "No!" I stepped forward, my voice louder than I'd heard it in months. "Ben, you can't do this. David told me the collection was important. He said..." "David was a hoarder, Mom." Ben snapped, his face reddening with irritation. "He was a librarian who thought he was some kind of treasure hunter. It's pathetic." He shoved the envelope of cash into his pocket and pulled out a single $50 bill. "Here," he said, pressing it into my palm like he was tipping a waitress. "Why don't you go buy yourself some lunch? We'll handle the heavy lifting." He pocketed the remaining $2,950 without hesitation. "I'll put this into the renovation fund for the house sale," he said with a wink that made my stomach turn. I looked down at the $50 in my hand. It felt cold, worthless, insulting. At that moment, something inside me broke. But it wasn't my spirit. Not this time. It was my love for him. The little boy with the dandelions was truly gone, replaced by this stranger in an expensive suit. "Okay, Ben," I said softly, keeping my voice steady. "You handle it." Mr. Varghese and his men loaded the boxes into their truck with shocking speed. They worked like they were afraid someone might change their mind, like they were escaping a crime scene. I watched from the kitchen window as they drove away, and I saw Mr. Varghese glance back at the house once. Just once, with an expression I couldn't quite read. 2 days later, the for sale sign went up in the front yard, like a tombstone for my marriage. And 3 days after that, Ben sat me down at the kitchen table with another stack of papers. "Great news, Mom," he said, pushing a document toward me with the same enthusiasm he'd shown selling the coins. "The house is sold. Cash offer. We close tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. "But where will I go? Is the Golden Horizon place ready for me?" Ben and Megan exchanged a quick glance, the kind married couples share when they're about to deliver bad news. "Well, about that," Megan said, examining her manicure like it was more interesting than my future. "Golden Horizon is actually fully booked right now. There's a 2-year waiting list." "But don't worry," Ben added quickly, holding up his hands. "We found you a great apartment. It's a studio, very cozy and efficient. And it's cheap," Megan added, which is good because, well, David didn't leave much life insurance, did he? "What about the money from the house?" I asked, my voice rising. "The house sold for $450,000. That's plenty for any retirement home." Ben cleared his throat and shifted in his seat, the first sign of discomfort I'd seen from him. "Actually, Mom, I used the power of attorney you signed last year." "The one for medical emergencies?" I asked, confusion clouding my thoughts. "The general one," he corrected, not meeting my eyes. "I've taken the proceeds from the house sale, and I'm going to invest it for you." "Invest it?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "There's this incredible opportunity," he continued, his salesman voice kicking in. "Cryptocurrency and foreign exchange markets in Europe. I can triple your money in 6 months. If we leave it in a savings account, inflation will just eat it alive," Megan added helpfully. "You took the money?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "All of it?" "I'm managing it," Ben said defensively, finally looking at me. "I gave you $10,000 for moving expenses and rent. That should last you a while if you're careful. Mom, I'm doing this for you, he said, emphasizing each word like I was a child who couldn't understand. You don't understand finance. If I leave you in charge, you'll lose everything to some phone scammer. I'm protecting you, he added, and the conviction in his voice was almost convincing. He checked his phone and stood up. Look, we have a flight to catch. We're going to Zurich to oversee the investments personally. Zurich? I asked weakly. But your company doesn't allow remote work. You told me that last Christmas. This is different, he said quickly, avoiding my question. The movers will be here at 8 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Be ready. He kissed me on the cheek, and it felt like being kissed by a stranger. You'll thank me later, Mom. I promise. The next day, I was standing in a 400-square-foot studio apartment overlooking a parking lot. The walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's television through them. The faucet in the tiny bathroom dripped with a steady rhythm that felt like a countdown to something terrible. The carpet was the color of old oatmeal and had stains I didn't want to identify. I had lost my home. I had lost my husband's collection. I had lost my dignity. I sat on a folding chair because my real furniture hadn't arrived yet, and stared at the water-stained wall. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me, and I picked it up with numb fingers. It was a notification from Instagram. Megan had posted a photo just 3 hours ago. They were in business class, holding glasses of champagne, their faces glowing with satisfaction. The caption read, "New beginnings. European investment tour starts now. #blessed, #hustle, #living our best life." They were drinking champagne with the money from my house, the house David and I had paid off over 30 years. I put the phone face down on the floor and wept. I cried until my chest ached and my eyes burned, and I had no tears left to give. There was a knock at my door the next morning, soft and polite. I wiped my face and shuffled over, expecting the building manager or maybe a delivery I'd forgotten about. Standing in the hallway was an elderly woman about my age, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was holding a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. "I'm Martha Patterson from 4B, right next door," she said with a warm smile. "I saw you moving in yesterday and thought you might like some company and a hot meal." I almost started crying again at the simple kindness. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Please come in." "I'm sorry, I don't have much furniture yet." Martha waved her hand dismissively and stepped inside. "I've been in this building for 3 years now," she said, setting the casserole on my tiny counter. "It's not the Ritz, but it's home." We sat on my folding chairs and ate her chicken casserole from paper plates. She told me about herself, how she'd been a school teacher for 35 years, how her 2 daughters had moved to California and rarely called. "They're busy," she said. But her eyes told a different story. They have their own lives now, their own families. "My son," I started, then stopped, not sure how much to share. "My son is the reason I'm here." Martha nodded slowly, like she understood without me having to explain. "We love them too much," she said quietly. "We give and give and give until there's nothing left. And they think that's just what mothers do." "They think it's their due," I agreed. "Like we owe them for being born." Martha reached over and squeezed my hand. "The hardest lesson I ever learned," she said, "was that my love couldn't save them from themselves. They have to learn on their own, or they never learn at all." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 mothers who had given everything and received so little in return. That evening, alone again, there was another knock at my door. This one was more formal, more deliberate. I opened it to find an elderly man in a perfectly tailored gray suit standing in my dingy hallway. He looked completely out of place, like a luxury car parked in a junkyard. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and removed his hat with the other. "Mrs. Carol Donovan?" he asked, his voice cultured and precise. "Yes?" I kept the door half closed, suspicious. "I am Elias Hart. I was your husband's attorney." "Attorney?" I almost laughed. David didn't have an attorney. He was a librarian. We couldn't even afford a proper accountant. Mr. Hart smiled, and there was something knowing in his eyes, something that made me pause. David was a man of many secrets, Mrs. Donovan. May I come in? Every instinct told me to close the door on this stranger. Scammers targeted lonely widows all the time. I'd seen the warnings on the evening news. How do I know you're who you say you are? I asked. Mr. Hart nodded approvingly, like I'd passed some kind of test. A wise question, he said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out something small wrapped in velvet. David asked me to show you this if you ever doubted me. He unwrapped the velvet to reveal a small, tarnished copper coin. It was nothing special to look at, just an old penny worn smooth by time. But I recognized it immediately, and my breath caught in my throat. Our first date, I whispered. David and I found that penny on the sidewalk outside the movie theater. It was 1971. He said it was lucky, Mr. Hart continued. He said that finding it with you was the moment he knew he was going to marry you. Tears spilled down my cheeks. No scammer could know that story. I hadn't told anyone, not even Ben. Please, I said, stepping back and opening the door wide. Please come in. Mr. Hart sat on my only armchair, looking somehow elegant despite the shabby surroundings. He placed the briefcase on his lap and folded his hands. David came to see me 5 years ago, he began. He was concerned about the future, about what might happen after he was gone. He loved your son very much. But he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, Ben has eyes for price, but no eyes for value. He sees the world as a transaction. I nodded, recognizing my husband's gentle wisdom. He was right, I said. He usually was. David established a protocol, Elias continued. A failsafe, he called it. He instructed me to intervene only if Ben did something drastic. When I saw the property transfer records yesterday, and when my contacts reported a bulk sale of numismatic items from your address, I knew it was time. But the coins are gone, I said, feeling the grief wash over me again. Ben sold them to a scrap dealer for $3,000. They're probably melted down by now. Elias let out a dry, knowing chuckle that surprised me. Mrs. Donovan, David knew Ben would do exactly that. He predicted it almost word for word. Do you remember the scrap dealer? Mr. Varghese? Yes, I said slowly. He seemed nervous, almost guilty. That's because Mr. Varghese works for me. I stared at him, not comprehending. David and I set up a dummy corporation years ago, Elias explained. If Ben ever tried to liquidate the collection without a proper appraisal, Mr. Varghese was instructed to buy it immediately, to secure the assets before they could be destroyed. He pulled a document from the envelope, a glossy catalog with photographs of coins I recognized. The coins were not melted down, Carol. They are currently sitting in a climate-controlled vault at the First National Bank downtown. He slid a single sheet of paper across my tiny table. And here is the certified appraisal David had updated just last month, before his heart attack. I picked up the paper with trembling hands. The letterhead was from a prestigious auction house I'd seen on television. My eyes scanned down to the number at the bottom of the page. My breath stopped. My heart stopped. The world stopped. $3,250,000. $3 million? I stammered, the paper shaking in my grip. David had one of the finest collections of early American currency on the East Coast, Elias said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. He built it slowly, quietly, over 40 years. He studied every piece, traded carefully, upgraded strategically. It was his masterpiece, Carol, and he built it for you. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, tears flowing freely now. Why didn't he tell me it was worth this much? Because he wanted to protect you, Elias said gently. And he wanted to teach Ben a lesson. He handed me a sealed envelope with David's handwriting on the front. My name written in his careful script. I opened it with shaking fingers. My dearest Carol, the letter read, if you are reading this, then Ben has likely disappointed us both. He thinks I was a simple man, and I let him think that. He thinks you are a weak old woman, and you must let him think that too, for now. Do not give him this money, Carol. I know your heart. I know you want to fix things. But if you give him millions now, he will burn through it just like he burned through our house. Wait. Be patient. Let him fail. Let him learn what it means to build something real with his own two hands. Only when he understands the true value of work should you show him the truth. I love you, Carol. I loved you from the moment we found that penny on the sidewalk. I will love you forever, even from wherever I am now. Your David. I pressed the letter to my chest and sobbed. Even in death, he was still taking care of me. Still teaching, still guiding, still loving. So technically, Elias said softly, giving me a moment to compose myself, you are the sole owner of assets totaling over $3 million. Plus, since the house sale was technically fraudulent due to coercion, we could pursue legal action. No, I said, and my voice surprised me with its strength. No lawsuits. Not yet. I looked at the picture of Ben and Megan drinking champagne, still visible on my phone screen. David wanted him to learn. So we are going to let him learn. What are your instructions, Mrs. Donovan? Elias asked. Keep the coins in the vault. I will stay in this apartment. I will live on my pension and the scraps Ben left me. And we will wait. Elias smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in his expression. Very well. The game is afoot. 3 months passed, each day longer than the last. I played my role perfectly, the struggling widow abandoned by her ungrateful son. I sent Ben emails asking for small amounts of money, just to see what he would do. Ben, the electric bill is high this month. Could you send $50? Ben, my refrigerator is making a strange noise. I'm worried it might break. His replies were sporadic, often coming days late. Mom, money is tight right now. The market is volatile. You need to budget better. We're dealing with some temporary liquidity issues. It's normal in high-level investing. He was gaslighting me about my own money, the money he had taken from me. But I didn't get angry, not outwardly. I just watched and waited. I watched his social media accounts like a hawk. The posts about the good, life started to slow down after the first month. The photos of fancy dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants disappeared. The check-ins at exclusive clubs stopped appearing. Then, 2 months in, the posts stopped completely. Megan's Instagram went private, and Ben deleted his Facebook entirely. Something was wrong, and I knew it before the news confirmed it. One Tuesday in November, I turned on the television while eating my simple dinner. Crypto market crash, the headline screamed across the screen. Major exchange insolvency announced. Billions lost overnight. Investors worldwide face devastating losses as regulatory investigation begins. I sipped my tea slowly, watching the panicked faces of young investors on the screen. Oh, Ben, I whispered to the television. I hope you kept some of that champagne. You're going to need it. 2 weeks after the crash, at 11 o'clock at night, there was a frantic pounding on my door. Not a knock, a pounding, desperate and unrelenting. I opened it carefully, keeping the chain on. Ben was standing there, and for a moment, I didn't recognize him. He looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. His expensive coat was wrinkled and stained. He hadn't shaved in what looked like a week. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and desperate. Mom! He pushed against the door. Mom, let me in. We have a problem. I unhooked the chain, and he stumbled past me into the tiny apartment. He looked around at the cramped space, at the water stains on the ceiling, at the furniture from Goodwill. For the first time, I think he actually saw where he had put me. Ben? What are you doing here? Where is Megan? Megan left, he spat out, pacing the small room like a caged animal. She went back to her parents in Connecticut. She filed for divorce yesterday. She said she didn't sign up for this. She said she married a winner, not a loser. He laughed bitterly, and there was no humor in it. But that doesn't matter right now. I need money, Mom. I need it now. Money? I kept my voice calm. But you said you were investing it. You said it would triple. It's gone, he screamed, kicking my secondhand sofa. It's all gone. The platform froze the assets. It was a Ponzi scheme. The whole thing. I lost everything. The house money, my savings, my 401k, everything. He grabbed my shoulders, his fingers digging in painfully. But listen to me. I met a guy in London, a collector. I showed him a picture of Dad's old desk, just a random photo on my phone from years ago. And he saw a coin in the background. He told me Dad was the librarian. That's what they called him in the collecting community. He said Dad had a collection worth millions. Millions, Mom. Ben shook me, his eyes wild. Did you know? Did you know he was sitting on a gold mine while we lived like peasants? I looked my son in the eye and felt nothing but sadness. Ben, you sold the collection, remember? To the scrap guy, for $3,000. Ben let go of me and paced the room, pulling at his hair with both hands. No, no, no! That guy, Mr. Varghese. I tried to call him. The number is disconnected. He cheated me. He stole from us. He knew what he was buying. He didn't steal anything, Ben. You made the deal. You called it junk metal. We have to find him, Ben yelled, his voice cracking. We have to sue him. There must be laws against this. He spun around and grabbed my arms again. Mom, do you have any money hidden? Anything at all? I have loan sharks looking for me. Real bad guys. I owe them $50,000 just in interest. I need money just to keep them away for another week. This was the moment David had predicted. The moment he had prepared me for. Ben was broke, desperate, and looking for a bailout, just like always. I have nothing, Ben, I said, and the lee came easier than I expected. You sold my house. You took my money. I have $200 in my checking account. Ben stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pure disgust, directed at his own mother. You're useless, he hissed, the words dripping with venom. Dad was a secret millionaire and you're living in this dump doing nothing? God, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? The question hung in the air, almost laughable in its lack of self-awareness. He collapsed onto my sofa, burying his face in his hands. I have nowhere to go, he sobbed. They took my condo. They repossessed my car. The Rolex was a fake. I bought it to impress clients. He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. I have nothing. I am nothing. I looked at my son, really looked at them. Part of me, the mother part, wanted to wrap him in my arms and tell him everything would be okay. Part of me wanted to write him a check, fix his problems, make the pain go away. That's what mothers do, isn't it? That's what I had always done. Cleaned up his messes, smoothed his path, protected him from consequences. And look where it had gotten us both. I remembered David's letter. Let him learn what it means to build something real. You can stay on the couch tonight, I said, my voice colder than I felt inside. But I'm not feeding you, and I'm not giving you a single dime. What am I supposed to do? He wailed. I don't know, Ben. Maybe you should get a job. A job? His face twisted with disbelief. I'm a consultant. I have a master's degree. No one is hiring people like me right now. Then lower your standards, I said, turning off the light. McDonald's is always hiring. I saw a sign in their window yesterday. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. For the first time in his life, Ben wasn't being rescued. That night, I lay in my narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. I could hear Ben tossing and turning on the couch, unable to sleep. Part of me wanted to go out there and comfort him, to stroke his hair like I did when he was a boy. But then I thought about the dandelions. about the little boy who picked flowers because he had no money for a real gift. That boy had loved me unconditionally, and somewhere along the way, I had lost him. Was it my fault? Did I give him too much? Expect too little? Did I teach him that love meant rescue? That family meant a safety net that would always catch him? The questions kept me awake until dawn. The next month was a silent battle fought in my 400-square-foot apartment. Ben slept on the couch, his long legs hanging over the armrest. He spent the first week calling his contacts, begging for loans, trying to revive his old life. Everyone blocked his number. He was toxic now, a failure, a cautionary tale. By the second week, the hunger set in. I cooked for myself, simple meals, soup and sandwiches, and the occasional casserole Martha brought over. I didn't offer Ben any of it. "Mom, seriously?" he said one evening, watching me eat a bowl of stew. "You're going to let me starve?" "You're a grown man, Ben. Figure it out." His jaw dropped, genuine shock on his face. This wasn't the mother he remembered, the one who always made things easy. Finally, on a Tuesday morning, Ben came back to the apartment wearing a neon green vest. He threw it on the floor like it was on fire. "Are you happy now?" he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "I got a job." "Oh?" I asked, not looking up from my book. "CEO of a tech firm?" "Night shift janitor. At the hospital. Scrubbing floors." "It's honest work," I said simply. "It's humiliating," he shouted, his face seared with shame. "I have a master's degree. I used to manage accounts worth millions." "And now you have a mop," I replied. "Dinner is in the fridge. You can have the leftovers." He stared at me for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then he walked to the fridge and ate the cold stew in silence. I watched him over the top of my book. It was a start. For 3 months, Ben worked. He came home every morning at 6 a.m., gray-faced with exhaustion, smelling of bleach and antiseptic. His hands, once manicured and soft, the hands of a man who typed for a living, grew rough and cracked. He lost weight, the expensive meals and champagne dinners catching up to him. The arrogance began to fade from his eyes, replaced by something I hadn't seen there in years. Humility. One night, he came in earlier than usual, around 4 a.m. He sat down at my small kitchen table and stared at his hands. "My back is killing me," he whispered, to no one in particular. "Dad used to stand all day, didn't he?" "At the library, putting books away, helping people find things." I put down my crossword puzzle. Yes, for 40 years. He never complained, not once. Ben looked at his rough, red hands. I used to make fun of him. I thought he was small, wasting his potential. He paused, fighting back something I realized were tears. "I scrubbed the emergency room floor tonight. A kid came in, maybe 10 years old. Car accident. The doctors worked on him for hours. They saved him. And I was just there in the corner, cleaning up the blood, trying to stay out of the way. But when it was over, the lead surgeon looked at me and said, 'Thanks for keeping it clean. We need a sterile field.'" Ben's voice cracked. It was the first time in years someone thanked me for actually doing something. Not for moving numbers on a screen, not for making a deal, but for actual work. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw a flash of the boy with the dandelions. "I messed up, Mom. I messed up so badly. I sold the house. I lost your money. It treated Dad's collection like garbage. I was so arrogant. I thought I was better than him because I made fast money. But I didn't build anything. I just gambled with other people's lives." He began to cry, quietly. Not the dramatic sobs of a man looking for pity. These were the tears of genuine remorse. "I'm sorry. I am so, so sorry. I'm going to pay you back. I don't know how long it will take. 10 years, 20 years. But I'll pay back every cent of the house money. I'll work double shifts. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at my son, really looked at him. This wasn't the Ben who had thrown coins into a box and called them junk. This was someone new, someone broken open by failure and slowly being rebuilt by honest work. "Get your coat, Ben," I said, standing up slowly. "What?" "I'm exhausted. I need to sleep." "Get your coat. We're going for a ride." I called a taxi and we rode downtown in silence. The sun was just starting to rise over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. Ben watched out the window, confused, too tired to ask questions. We stopped in front of the First National Bank, its marble columns gleaming in the early light. "Why are we here?" Ben asked, rubbing his eyes. "Just follow me." We met Elias in the lobby, dressed asymptotically as the first time I'd seen him. Ben froze when he recognized him. "You're the lawyer guy." "From the funeral. You handled Dad's will." "Hello, Benjamin," Elias said coolly. "Follow me, please." We went down into the vault, past security guards and locked doors. The air was cool and smelled of steel and old money. The bank manager led us to a large safety deposit box, the size of a small cabinet. Elias nodded, and the manager placed it on a viewing table and opened the lid. "Look," I said to Ben. Ben stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Inside, organized on velvet trays, were the coins. Hundreds of them, gleaming in the soft light. Gold double eagles with their dull, heavy luster. Silver dollars from the 1700s, their edges worn by 2 centuries of history. Ancient Roman denarii that David had spent years tracking down. Ben's mouth fell open. "But I sold these. Mr. Varghese took them. They're supposed to be melted down." "Mr. Varghese works for me," Elias said. "Your father knew you would try to sell them as scrap. We intercepted the sale to protect the collection." "These are real?" Ben whispered, reaching out a trembling hand but not daring to touch. "They are real," I confirmed. "And the current appraisal value is $3.5 million. Ben stumbled backward as if he'd been physically struck. $3 million? $3.5 million? He looked at me, horror dawning on his face. I sold $3 million for $3,000? I threw away my father's legacy for pocket change? "You looked at your father's life work and called it junk," I said softly. "You looked at me and called me useless. Tell me, Ben, what do you call yourself now?" The words hung in the air, not cruel, just honest. Ben stared at the gold, at the silver, at 40 years of quiet dedication. Tears streamed down his face, but they weren't tears of greed this time. They were tears of shame, of recognition, of finally understanding what he had almost destroyed. "Dad knew," Ben whispered. "He knew I would do exactly this." "He knew," I confirmed. "And he told me to wait until you understood what work actually means." Ben looked at his rough, bleach-burned hands. Then he looked back at the gold. Something shifted in his expression. "I can pay off the loan sharks," he muttered, almost to himself. "I can buy a new condo, get back on my feet, start over." Then he stopped. He looked at Elias, then at me. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "No?" "No?" I asked. "I don't deserve this," Ben said, and his voice was steady now, stronger than I'd heard it in months. "If you give me this money, I'll just waste it again. I haven't earned it. Dad earned this. He built it with 40 years of patience and knowledge and love. I tried to destroy it in 40 minutes." He stepped away from the table, physically distancing himself from the fortune. "Keep it, Mom. It's yours. Buy yourself a real house, not that apartment. Travel the world. Do whatever makes you happy." "And what about you?" Elias asked, raising an eyebrow. "I have my job at the hospital," Ben said. And there was something like pride in his voice. "And I've been reading about coins, about history. I want to understand what Dad saw in them, why they mattered so much. Maybe I can volunteer at the library on weekends, if they'll have me. I want to learn to build something real, like he did." I smiled, a real smile, the first one in months. "I think David would like that very much." 6 months later, I stood in the living room of a small cottage I'd bought with some of the coin money. It wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms and a garden, but it had a porch where I could watch the sunset. David would have loved it. I donated some of the coins to a museum in David's name so others could learn from his passion. The rest I kept in trust, just in case. Ben visited every Sunday now after his morning shift at the hospital. He'd been promoted to supervisor of the cleaning staff, a small step, but one he'd earned. He brought groceries with money from his own pocket, and we cooked dinner together. This particular Sunday, he handed me an envelope along with the bag of vegetables. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a $50 bill and a handwritten note. "This is the first installment. I'll pay back every cent. I promise." I looked at my son, at the man he was slowly becoming. "You kept it," I said. "The $50 you gave me that day in the attic." "I wanted to," he admitted. But then I realized I needed to start somewhere. I put the money in my pocket and pulled him into a hug. "I'm proud of you, Ben." "I have a long way to go," he said into my shoulder. "But I'm trying. I'm really trying." That evening, after he left, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the same colors as David's coins. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the $50, looking at it in the fading light. Then I looked at David's photograph on the table beside me. "He's learning, David," I said softly. "He's finally learning." I could almost hear his voice, gentle and wise as always. I knew he would, Carol. I just needed someone to teach him. The evening air was warm, and somewhere in the distance a church bell rang. I smiled and lifted my teacup in a small toast. "To patience," I whispered, "and to second chances." So I ask you now, as we come to the end of this story, have you ever had to watch someone you love fail completely before they could learn to succeed? Have you ever had to be strong enough to let them fall? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the freedom to find their own way home.